Hi, so in the latest video in the education series, we're going to look at some of the um, aspects of the school system that was set up after the Second World War. One of the things we talked about is how originally the idea was for what's called a tripartite system. So it had three prongs, if you like, the grammar school, the secondary modern, and the technical school. And the intention was not to create something with a hierarchy so that one was better or worse than any of the others. The three were supposed to be equally applicable, and the idea was to try and find out what kind of a student you were so that you went to the most appropriate school. But because of the fact that very few technical schools were actually built, um, really most areas had a choice between a grammar school and a secondary modern. And because the grammar schools were the ones that took exams and you could get to university, and because you sat an 11 plus exam to determine whether you were going to go to grammar school or not, whether you were that academic or not, you can understand how it became seen as you either passed the 11 plus or you failed. So you passed and you went to the grammar school, or you failed and you went to secondary modern. Now this is despite the fact that there wasn't a pass or a fail element to the 11 plus. You just got a score, and based on your score in the exam, the grammar school would offer you a place or not. So there wasn't any fail or pass percentage or grade. Now the issue is then, what was it like? What was the experience like of taking the 11 plus? And how did people feel if they got offered a place and were perceived to have passed, or didn't get offered a place and were perceived to have failed? So one of the things I'm going to do is just give you some example questions that 11-year-olds would have sat on their 11 plus exams, and you can get a feel for an experience for how that would have felt. So what I'll ask you to do then is to look at these questions and just pause the video here while you try and do them. And then I'll count you in to me flipping over to the answers. The first one is an arithmetic question. In fact, the first two are: a man left home at 11:30 a.m. and cycled 5 miles to a railway station at the rate of 12 miles an hour. He waited 10 minutes at the station, and then he travelled by train a distance of 36 miles at the rate of 24 miles an hour. At what time did he reach his destination? The second question: there were 9,975 spectators at a football match. This is 5% more than were present at the preceding match. How many attended the previous match? Okay, so how you would tackle these is obviously with this first time question. You're going to look, and he cycled 5 miles at the rate of 12 miles an hour. Well, there are 5 12s in 60. Okay, so that should give you an idea about how many minutes it takes for him to cycle each mile. All right, so it might be 5 minutes per mile if there are 12 per hour. So 5 minutes per mile, cycling 5 miles, that might be 25 minutes, and then he waits 10 minutes, and then travelling by train a distance of 36 miles at the rate of 24 miles an hour. Well, 24 miles an hour is twice as fast as 12 miles an hour. And so if you know that 12 miles an hour is 5 miles a minute, it might be 2.5 minutes, 5 minutes per mile, sorry, it might be 2.5 minutes per mile if he's going at 24 miles an hour. So you might have, I gave you a bit of a help there to try and work it out, but you still might not be any the wiser because, academic arithmetic might not be your thing. Your skills might lie elsewhere. For the spectators questions, similarly. Okay, so I'm going to say pause the video now and try and work them out. Give yourself a couple of minutes and then unpause, and we'll see what the answers are. So pause it now. Okay, so hopefully you've had a go and now you've unpaused, and so now I'm going to reveal what the answers were. Okay, and the answers were 1:35 p.m. 9,500 spectators. It doesn't matter whether you got the answers right or wrong. The experience of trying to work them out, and that kind of feeling or process or experience of finding out, am I academically minded or not, is something that would be familiar to many students from that era. And the issue that I want to raise is, how important was it for people to be academic? Is academic aptitude the only valid way of measuring the worth of a student? Are there other ways, other skills, other methods by which people can be valuable members of society? Okay, so are we setting up a system, if we're looking at the 11 plus as like a gold standard and grammar schools as the ultimate or the pinnacle, are we setting up a system which privileges academic attainment and, perhaps to the detriment of other opportunities? There are also some English questions. Okay, I'll let you pause it here so you can have a look. But this first question is write out the following passage, but include only the one correct word from each bracket. So there are 3 in most of the brackets, 2 in some. So you put the correct word so that it's grammatically correct. And then the second question is make adjectives from the following nouns. So you can pause it here and have a go. Oh, excuse me. And we'll see how you do in a minute. Okay, pause it now. Okay, so hopefully you paused it and you had a go. And so here was what the answers look like. Okay, and so this was an example of an English question, or 2 English questions on the 11 plus paper. Now the point of these is that you'd have had, I don't know, a minute and a half to do each of these questions. You wouldn't have long. So you might have 50 questions in 50 minutes, sort of thing, and on each of the maths and the English papers. And it was pretty tough exams. Is everybody suited to this style of exam? And exactly what is happening if we're saying that some students will get offered places at grammar school and others would not? What does it mean? Okay, oh sorry, and there's a general intelligence question as well. Okay, so I'll let you pause it here and then you can try and work out this one. So pause it here. So hopefully you paused it and had a go, and then these were the answers. Okay, and on that basis, people were offered places at grammar school or not. And so the question we want to ask ourselves today is we want to look at the extent to which children have got equality of opportunity in British schools, okay, in the past and also in the present. And so the question we're asking is the education system meritocratic? Now, meritocratic means that the best students demonstrating the best abilities will get the best marks. And the idea in a meritocratic society is then that the best students with the best marks might get the best jobs, the best opportunities, etc., and rise to the top. The only problem with meritocracy and the idea of a meritocratic society is that, well, the idea is that the best should be at the top. So when we look up at the top, we should see the best there. And the problem with that is if we look up and we think that maybe Boris Johnson isn't the best that we can produce, or that Donald Trump, until recently President of the United States, wasn't necessarily the best that the Americans could produce. And even now, Joe Biden might not be the best that the Americans can produce. So if we feel that, then we have to ask ourselves, is it really a meritocracy if the best people are not getting to the top? Okay, but certainly in education we ask ourselves, is it meritocratic? Are we rewarding the best? What we will understand is that children in our education system often have very different experiences of their education. We understand, or we will come to understand, that there are many factors that can affect how children do in school. Okay, many children will do well because of these factors, but many won't. And many of these factors are external, they're social. They're nothing to do with your intellectual or academic abilities. They are social factors which affect how you perform in school. And they're nothing to do with, any idea of cleverness or intelligence. So what we want to do is we want to identify some of the social characteristics that might mean that children are more likely to succeed or fail. So some of these influences from outside society. Won't worry about that today. So what's meritocracy? So one of the main understandings of our education system, and especially the functionalist way of looking at it, is that it's like a ladder of opportunity. People who work hard and achieve good results can climb the ladder and get to the top. And people kind of achieve their ability level. Okay, so as long as you live up to your potential, you'll find a place on the rungs of the ladder that are appropriate for you. The best people will go on to gain the best jobs, and they'll become the leaders in society, and then the rest of us will occupy various positions lower down and perform to the best of our functions. And so in a functional society, the way the functionalists would see it, this is called a meritocracy. And functionalists believe this is a very efficient way of allocating roles and rewards in our society. So the current social debate is that in Britain since World War II, we've had an education system operating under the principle of providing equal opportunity for all pupils. Okay, so the question is, do all children in Britain have an equal chance to do well? So if you stop a moment and consider that, whether your answer is yes or no, for example, and maybe why. So do all children in Britain have an equal chance to do well? So some of you would have thought yes, and some of you would have thought no. And what I want you to do is to write down why you thought whichever it was. Then I want you to go on and think about this. Is Britain a meritocracy? So is Britain a society where the best and most able people occupy the top positions, and the lower down positions are occupied by the less able? Okay, so have a think about that too. And your answer might be yes, Britain is a meritocracy, and the answer might be no, Britain's not a meritocracy. But what I want you to do is write down your response, and then write down a couple of bullet points about why you think whichever one it was. Either it is a meritocracy, so why is it, or why do you think it is, and then why is it not? Okay, if that's what you thought. And you might be able to write down points for both, because you might not be sure. Certainly, we've got to ask ourselves that question. Do we all have an equal chance to do well, and therefore is it a meritocracy? You might not know this, but all schools and colleges and universities and most workplaces will have an equality policy. All schools have them. All colleges have them. Governors and people who run colleges must discuss the policies. Teachers must apply the policies. Equality policy applies to all government departments as well. Examination systems are expected to be conducted in a way that's equally fair to all candidates. Ofsted in England and Estyn in Wales will come and inspect schools, and they will pay attention to how well schools and colleges apply their equality policy. Okay, so did you know that you had one? So here's a quick quiz. What's meritocracy? Okay, see if you can answer that. Pause it while you think. What's the purpose of school policy, do you think? Pause it while you think. How aware are you of your school's, or in this case college's, equality policy? Have you ever read it? Did you know there was one? How aware are teachers of the school's or college's equality policy? So don't put your teachers on the spot by asking them, but it'd be interesting to find out, wouldn't it? We deal with a lot of policies and different bits of legislation, so yeah, don't shoot us if we can't quote it word for word. Now, here's a thing. I want you to write down, so pause this and write down in a second, your definition of equality. Okay? Normally we would do this in class in a discussion, but right now you're going to do this on your own. So I want you to pause the video and write down your definition of equality. How would you define equality? So pause it now. Okay, so hopefully you've written your definition of equality. Okay? Now, here's a guy called Halsey, not the singer, A.H. Halsey. And Halsey decided that there were two types of opportunity that we should, two types of equality, beg your pardon, that we should be concerned with. The first is equality of opportunity, and the second is equality of outcome. And the two are not the same. Equality of opportunity is where everyone has equal access to the institutions in society. Okay, everyone has equal access. And equality of outcome is where people appear in social institutions in the same proportions that they appear in our society. All right. Now you might ask yourself, what's the difference? Okay. So equality of opportunity is like, if you think about the start of the process, do we all have equal access to whatever it is that is going on? So if there's a wall and there are three of us, and one of us is 9'3", and one of us is 5'10", and the other one is 3'2", and we all want to see over the wall. If we're all treated equally, we'd get given a chair each, and if we were treated equally, we'd get given the same chair. Okay, because that would be what someone would consider equal treatment, okay, equality. The problem is that the same chair is probably not needed by the person who's 9'3", might be needed by the person who's 5'10", might definitely be needed by the person who's 3'2", but the 9'3" person can see over the wall. Now the 5'10" person can see over the wall because they've got the chair, but even with the chair, the 3'2" person might not be able to see over the wall. So by treating people in identical ways, treating people the same, we may still fall short of providing equality of opportunity because we might not be providing equal access to things in society. So we do have a slight qualification to how we do equality of opportunity, in that we might say that we treat people equally, each according to their need. Okay, so we recognize that some people need extra help to get to the same point where they have equal access as everyone else in society. Likewise, equality of outcome, that's a different kettle of fish. That's if everyone sits an exam and everyone has an equal opportunity and equal access to that exam, we know that not everyone's going to get the same result. Okay, so equality of outcome, we'd be looking at, are the results, for example, distributed in proportions that match the way that certain things like social class, ethnicity, age, etc., gender, are distributed in society. All right, but we might feel that we've got less control over that, perhaps. So if we look at this graph, we can see that this is measuring attainment of 5 or more GCSE grades A star to C. Okay, and this is divided not by upper, middle and lower class, but by the NSSEC, which is a way of deciding social class that the government has adopted for the last sort of 20, 30 years, which we'll talk about at some point in sociology. For now, I just want you to notice the correlation, the match-up between the higher professional and the lower professional, and the higher percentage of 5 A star to C GCSE grades. Okay, so you can see the higher professionals are almost getting 80%, 70 odd percent there, definitely 75 maybe, 5 A stars to C. Lower professionals getting about 65, maybe 64. Intermediates are getting about 52. Lower supervisory and routine and other are getting less and less. Okay, what is the connection? And by the way, if you're wondering what intermediate means, intermediates might be professions where you don't need professional qualifications in order to do them. So the manager in the shop might need professional qualifications to be the manager, but the workers who work under the manager, for example, might not need that. And so they might be the intermediates or the lower supervisories. You can see that there is a direct link between the profession of a candidate's family and their achieved grades. Okay, so you can see there's a connection between the higher status families and the higher grades. Okay, so here's a question for you. What is the relationship then between social class and educational attainment? Is there one? Is it the case that the higher the social class, the better you'll do in education? Your answer might be yes, in which case I want you to write down some notes about why you think that that's the case. Why is it that higher social class equals higher educational attainment? What are those factors, do you think? And if you're saying no, if you think there isn't a relationship, I want you to explain then what you think is the main driver behind educational achievement. If it's not social class, what is it? Is it intelligence? Is it gender? Is it ethnicity? What is it that makes people achieve high grades in education? And you might not be sure. You might think, well, it's a bit of both, in which case write down some points for and points against the idea of there being a strong relationship between social class and educational attainment. So pause it here and write down your bullet points. Okay, thanks. So hopefully you've made some notes on what you think the relationship between social class and educational attainment might be. Okay, now I want you to think about this. I want you to think about the fact that people do achieve unequally. And if we go back, we can see that there is, or appears to be, a demonstration relationship between higher social class and higher ability, higher attainment. So does this inequality of educational attainment matter? Okay, so we're going to look at the next slide and think about that. Here are the employment rates and earnings for full-time employees by highest qualification, and this is data from spring 2003, but it's still valid now. The top bars are for people who have achieved a degree or equivalent qualification. The second one down for people in higher education, things like City and Guilds and HNDs. A-levels, a third, and GCSEs, A to C equivalent, and then other qualifications, and then finally no qualifications. And we can see that the people who have higher levels of qualification are more likely, if you look on the left-hand side, they're more likely to be in employment, okay, to the extent that they're possibly nearly twice as likely to be in employment if they have a degree as those who have no qualifications. And if you look at the weekly gross earnings, people with degrees are going to earn, pretty much twice what people with no qualifications are going to earn. If we stop and consider that and the effect that that might have on people's lives, but also the effect on the next generation. So imagine that, fast forward and imagine that these people have children of their own and families of their own, and then those children go to school. The children of the higher earners, the higher qualified, the more professional families, we've already seen are more likely to do better in school. So what does this mean for our idea of a meritocracy? If we can see that there's a provable link between social class and educational attainment, is that a cycle that keeps repeating itself? And in case you're depressed at this point, does that mean then you're doomed if you don't come from a family which has, a highly qualified person in it, and you're not, necessarily the top earners? Does that mean you can't do well? Okay, so these are all interesting questions. What it does, though, is it calls into question this idea of meritocracy, that the best results are purely as a result of the best ability. Okay, now, obviously ability plays some part. However, is it a coincidence, or is there something behind this, that the best abilities and the best achievements seem to also correlate with the highest qualified and the better paid and the higher social class? So who is unequal? So which one of these do you think is the most important and which one is the least important thing in terms of educational achievement? Is social class the thing that's going to mean all the difference between you doing well or not? Is it gender that makes the big difference between you doing well or not? Ethnicity, is that the big factor determining whether you do well or not? Or is it the locality and type of school that you attend? Okay, so I want you to just make a guess. Choose which one you think is the most important and the least important, or you could rank them 1, 2, 3, 4 if you wish, okay? But I want you to think about which of these might be the most important. Pause it here and make your choices. Once you've written them down, then you can unpause. Okay, so hopefully you made your choices. Now, what we're going to think about at this point then, by the way, your choice we'll come back to later on, but at the moment it's just good that you wrote down which ones you think are most important. We're going to come back to why in another time. What we've looked at is the equality of opportunity, is when people have the same access to rights and opportunities. We think that British society does offer some equality of opportunity, but there are exceptions, okay? So it's not always perfect. We understand now that equality of outcome is when people actually do as well or as badly in the proportion in which they appear in the population. So, for example, the numbers of girls and boys that do well at GCSE should roughly fall 55% female, 45% male, because that's the proportion of male and female in the population. We understand that British society doesn't have equality of outcome, and that many cases inequalities are widening. Okay. So sometimes things get worse from year to year, from generation to generation. If you do well, it's likely then your children will do well. If you don't, it's likely your children won't. And then we've identified the main areas of inequality in terms of education are social class, gender, ethnicity, and locality or type of school. All right. Now, you could pause the video at this point and spend 10 minutes answering this question. Is the British education system meritocratic? Okay, in order to answer it, you'll need to summarize the key points of this lesson so far and demonstrate that you've retained some knowledge and understanding of the elements of the British education system which are to do with meritocracy. Okay, so you can pause it here and answer that, and in 10 minutes or less when you've finished, you can unpause and carry on. One of the things you might do is you might go to the BBC News website and look in the education section. Now, these stories are reasonably out of date now, and there are more recent ones that I'll put in the chat for you. But it's a good idea to look in the education section on the BBC News site, because you will pick up on what the latest stories are in the education world, and that would be really useful for you for your work on Unit 2 in AS Sociology. But for now, put the notes that you've made this lesson into your folder and get ready for the next lesson. Okay, but thank you very much.